I just go by James. Some people will call me Guro. That's fine. Just means teacher. I'm fine with that. I prefer just not using any titles, honestly. Titles mean politics, and I don't want to be involved in that. I don't want people to see me as someone higher than them. I want to say, hey, I have a little bit more knowledge than you, and I just want to guide them in the right direction. And I think when you use titles, I don't want to create this wall, this separation that I'm better than you in some because I have a title. Interestingly enough, I am part Filipino. My dad is a Filipino national that moved here right after World War II. He joined the U.S. Navy, was able to get his path to citizenship that way. So I grew up in naval housing my whole life. I was actually born in the Annapolis Naval Academy, and my parents lived up and down the East Coast while my dad was in the Navy. Naval housing was a great place to grow up because you were surrounded. It was like every culture you could ever imagine. Filipino, Japanese, African, all these people from all over the world were your neighbors. And you had the world at your fingertips. We would walk next door and have African food. We would have Greek food. It was amazing. It was one of the best places to grow up. And my mom and dad were certainly involved in the Filipino community while we were growing. After that, in and around Baltimore. It was great. It was a great place to grow up. I didn't get involved in the Filipino martial arts until later in life, though. I've worked in bookstores all of my life. Since I got out of college, I started at Walden Books. I worked there 10 years, and then I worked for Borders for a little over 10 years, and now I work at an independent bookstore here in New Orleans called Octavia Books, and I've worked there for 13 years. So I love books. I met my wife at a bookstore. I met my wife at Walden Books. The reason I came down here is my wife and I came down on vacation, and we fell in love with the place. About a year later, I get look at the postings, and there's like assistant manager position is open up. So I call the GM, and he's like, "Yeah, come on down." So I moved down. I was there for about 3 weeks. The GM said, "I hate this place. I'm moving back to Michigan. I'm gonna make sure you get the GM job." And so I was the GM there for basically 9 years, and then I left, and now I work at the independent bookshop and teach Escrima here. I was in my early 30s when I started, and I'm 57 now. So it was very late when I started doing it. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely my first martial art. I had some incidents at work where me and my district manager were getting death threats from a former employee, and my dad's like, we were like, well, maybe I should take some self-defense classes or whatever. My dad's like, oh, I know this group of people, I know this family, the Pataling Hugs, we should go over there. So my dad wanted to do something with me. So I would say that my dad was about my age right now when he started doing it. And he was like, did it for like a month. He's like, I don't want to do this. I fell in love with it. As soon as I started doing this, I fell in love with it. I was literally at every class that they had, they're like, you can't come to the advanced class. I'm like, all right. But I was there every day, even when there was no class. I ended up doing stuff in the back room where we would fight with, the Paddling Hug family is big in the weak half circuit. So I was like, I don't like those padded vests and the helmets. Let's fight with lacrosse gloves and nothing else. And so we did that, and they let me do that, and that was great. But I ended up teaching there because I was there all the time. I loved it. And at that point I had, it's a big Filipino community, so I had met other Filipino martial artists, and then my dad's friends were, the story, oh, Jimmy, you're doing the Arnis. Come over to the house, I'll show you. And so I got a couple of those, and that was fun because they didn't pick on me. I would always take my big white friend who was 6'4", and they would always want to put him in the holds and knock him down. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And then they would be mean to him, but not as mean to me. So I learned a lot from them. And then I, also did Aikido, traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. I did several years of different kinds of salat. I did Mandimura salat. I've done some Dator salat. So I'm kind of all over the place. But Filipino martial arts is is my love, and it is the thing that I always go back to and always will. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so the style is Doce Perez. So at that point, there was no separation between Kakoi Doce Perez and Doce Perez International. The Pataling Hugs had trained with a bunch of different people. It's their kind of take on Doce Perez, so it's Doce Perez, Pataling Hug, Doce Perez. They're really big on the WCAF circuit. They've won many world championships for that, for WCAF sparring and that kind of thing. I, of course, did a lot of that, but it's not my cup of tea. I'd rather do it with no padding and go at it hard and see what happens. Thankfully, they let, Mr. Carlos let us do it, and I was happy. Like it was on the down low, but we went to a couple schools and fought. We would like, hey, you guys want to fight? And we would just go to their schools, and we did this a couple of times, where a group of the guys from Kick Connection, which is the name of the school, would go to another school and fight, and we would fight the way we wanted to fight, which was with helmets and gloves, and that's it. It was fun because it's interesting to fight another school because you don't expect, you're not going to know what they do, right? It's if you have the same instructor and you're sparring with the same person, that same teacher, you kind of know what to expect, right? But when you're sparring somebody that's from another school, you have no idea what they're going to do. Now tap left, now you go. Yeah. So Crescent City Eskrima is sort of my personal expression of what I've learned over the years. Crescent City is sort of the name for New Orleans. It's just an old name for Philly. And if you look at the river, it runs through the city like that, and it's a crescent, so that's why we call it Crescent City. Eskrima, of course, I use that in deference to Doce Perez Eskrima, and I think that is probably one of the more historically accurate names to call what we do, besides Filipino martial arts. Well, the interesting thing is, when I moved down here, there was literally nobody that taught Eskrima. I looked high and low everywhere. And so I said, well, I want to do something. So I found a traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu school. At this point, that was before, before I think Ultimate Fighting started, and or right at the time. So there was no BJJ schools or any of that. This was traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. So it was, about 50% standing up, 50% on the ground. And of course the locks and the throws are pretty universal. After the first class, the instructor came over to me and he goes, "You've done some martial arts before, haven't you?" I said, "Yeah, I've done some Filipino martial arts before." And so I ended up teaching privately to his students. And really the only reason I started teaching is so I could continue to practice Filipino martial arts. And people responded to that, and after I did that until 2005 when his dojo was destroyed by Katrina, and then in 2007 I started teaching at the place I teach now, which is NOLA BJJ, and I do a couple classes a week and enjoy doing it. And again, the reason I do it is not to make a lot of money or anything like that. It's just so I can continue to practice the love of Filipino martial arts and to help other people find it too. I think I just fell into it. I think that, and I will say that I think that the best way to learn something is by teaching it. So, I don't know who told me this, but the way that you learn something is there's 4 ways to learn something, right? One is by observing it, one by doing it, right? And one by having it done to you. And the 4th way is by explaining it or teaching it. So when you do put all those 4 things together, then you start to understand things. So I'll have somebody that hasn't even, I don't think, they master a technique. I'll say, go over there and work with that person. And I said, and then afterwards I'll say, did anything happen when you were explaining this? And he'd, yeah, I started to understand the technique better because they have to articulate what they're doing. And when you do that, it becomes clear what you're trying to do. I found that I've had a lot of revelations by teaching, but no, I didn't start out being like, I want to be an instructor, I want to get my black belt, I want to do that. No, I just did it because I love it, and I think that's I think that's part of it. You know, you wanna help people get better. You want to propagate the art. And so the past 6 years, I had started training with Michael Janich with Martial Blade Concepts. Now, his system is not specifically Filipino martial arts, but is very heavily influenced by Filipino martial arts. I love his system. Probably 75 or 80% of the knife curriculum is based on his curriculum. And I love his stuff. I only see him like once or twice a year, but I try to get as much time as I can, because it's, you know, I work at a bookstore. I don't make a lot of money, so traveling can be difficult. And eventually he made me an affiliate instructor. I don't think, well, that's fine. But now I can be listed on his website. So people have found me that way too. I don't necessarily, what I tell people is I don't think that my approach is unique. My feeling is that I think that a lot of Filipino martial arts are not necessarily interested in lineage as much as they're interested in efficiency or making the art your own, whatever. Everybody has their own version of the art. And I think that's kind of smart. I think that people understand that even if you try to teach someone the exact way that your instructor taught you, you're not the same person. You're gonna move differently than your instructor did, and so you're gonna have to find your own way. And I think the more that you understand that, I think that, you know, I don't try to teach people to move like I do. I just want them to move well, right? I don't want them to fight like I do. I just want them to fight well. That's from Michael Janich. He says that. And so if I can do that, if I can help them, guide them that way, that's what I want. So I don't think that's anything unique. I think that's part of sort of the traditional way that Filipino martial arts was taught, because that's why we have all these systems. We're not interested in like, you have to do it this specific way. And like you and I were talking about, the best fighters are not the best teachers, because they're two different skill sets. And unless you develop that skill set of learning how to articulate and watching people fight, being able to show them how to do the technique, instead of just mimicking what they, oh, just do what I do. That's not a really good teacher, but you need someone to help you guide along the way. And I don't think that's unique. I think that all good instructors do that. I don't think that necessarily my approach is unique. It's a very non-hierarchical, for sure, my teaching style. That's one of the reasons I like it, Filipino martial arts, because it can be what you want it to be, right? If you want to be very strict and line everybody up and make them do 1,000 number one strikes, you can do that. If you want to do something else, learn how to flow from one technique to the next and not worry about whether the intricacies of their number one is more to the side and up, you know, more at an angle, then you can do that too. You don't want to start here, you start here. It's really interesting, and God bless technology. And the interesting thing is, my dad is, like I said earlier, from the Philippines. He grew up in General Santos. So we always heard rumors about where my great-grandfather was from, and we never had any documentation. Of course, after the war, a lot of the documentation was destroyed. What we found, so my sister gets an email from somebody that says, how are you related to me? Your last name is Wilson, and we have no record of where you're from. And she goes, well, the Wilson is from the Philippines. And so we find out that after the Filipino-American War, my great-grandfather, Fountain Muncie Wilson, that was his name, went to the Philippines to build roads. Now, you know, he was a colonizer. Let's get that out of the way. He was definitely a colonizer. I'm a product of that. So what happened was Fountain Muncie Wilson went to the Philippines, had a baby. The mother died in childbirth. My grandfather was the result. When he went to collect the baby, they said, no, the baby died too. And so he never knew. Fountain Muncie Wilson died in the Philippines in 1942 of tuberculosis. We know this through the letters that he wrote back to his family in the United States. My grandfather never knew his father was in the Philippines. They told the family, the Palama family, told him that he actually died on a ship. The ship sank when he was going back to the Philippines. So my grandfather, Alfredo Wilson, never knew that his father was in the Philippines. And Fountain Muncie Wilson, again, died in 1942. And so my grandfather, who was from the Central Philippines, moved to General Santos with General Santos, and started that down there. The Paloma side of the family thought that all the Wilsons were wiped out during the war. When my dad joined the U.S. Navy, he ran into a guy his last name was Paloma, and he said, "Oh," he goes, "What's your last name, Wilson?" And he realized it was his first cousin. So I have Palomas here that I know that are my second cousins. So that's how I got the Filipino in me. Even though I don't look Filipino, I'm what I don't know, 3/8 Filipino. It's there. People look at me and they're like, "What? You're Filipino?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Filipino." This is the oldest community of Filipinos was founded here in New Orleans. And there's been a lot of research. So unfortunately, a lot of that got destroyed through hurricanes. There was actually a place called Little Manila. A lot of the contention was, some people say that, they jumped ship off the Spanish galleon, started their community here. But a lot of them just emigrated because it's the same weather. One of the things that they taught how to dry fish to the Cajuns, right? So they dried fish, how they did it. But so it was a big community. It got wiped out. Like you and I saying, when your history, there's not a geographic community of Filipinos here anymore. They're kind of all spread out, partially because of the hurricane and partially because the community is so old, right? That there's not just one geographic location like a little Manila anymore. But oldest Filipino community in the United States. The reason I do this is just because I love Filipino martial arts. My teaching style is extremely casual, and some people really like that, and some people don't. That's okay, as long as they learn something. If I can help them, guide them in the direction of efficiency and understanding what Filipino martial arts is about. I've been doing it now for, like I said, I don't know, 25, 30 years, and I enjoy the heck out of it still. You know, sometimes I'll have very few people in class, and then I'll have some people. It's fine, you know, as long as I get to continue to practice, and that's one of the reasons, like I said to you, is the reasons I keep teaching is so I can continue to practice Filipino martial arts, and it's the reason I started teaching in the first place, and I enjoy doing it. I am pretty happy with the way things are. I like it when people, like when I did advertising and tried to reach out to people, you end up with people that I not necessarily want to train, like that I feel like I have to, you know, like, oh yeah, they're here to learn something, and usually they ended up being not the best students. But the people that organically find me, that search for Eskrima and find me and reach out to me, those are the people that actually want to learn Eskrima, and actually those are the kind of people that I like to teach, right? So to make it bigger, I could stand a few more students, but I'm not gonna do anything to get more.